The emergency alert pierced through the quiet hum of Research Station Omega-7, jolting Dr. Sarah Chen from her microscope. Red warning lights pulsed across her laboratory's pristine white walls as the station's AI announced, "Unknown vessel on collision course. Impact in 3 minutes." Sarah's fingers flew across the holographic interface, bringing up the external cameras. What she saw made her breath catch, a small craft, clearly damaged, tumbling end over end through space. Its design was unlike anything she'd seen in her 15 years of xenobiological research. "Computer, analyze vessel composition," she commanded, already reaching for her emergency suit. "Warning, vessel contains traces of Nexary alloys. Current diplomatic protocols prohibit interference with Nexary craft without explicit authorization." Sarah hesitated for only a second. The Nexary were notoriously isolationist, and their technological superiority made most humans nervous. But the craft's erratic movement pattern suggested its pilot was either unconscious or dead. Protocol or not, she couldn't just watch someone die. "Deploy emergency tractor beam," she ordered, rushing toward the airlock. "And get Dr. Martinez to prep the quarantine bay." The tractor beam caught the vessel just as it would have crashed into the station's outer hull. Up close, Sarah could see the damage was even worse than she'd initially thought. The craft's hull was riddled with precise holes, weapons fire, not asteroid damage. It took her team 20 minutes to cut through the damaged airlock. The acrid smell of burned circuitry hit her first, then the sight of him, a Nexary male, crumpled in the pilot's seat. His iridescent scales, normally a sign of high social status among his kind, were dulled with injury and stress. Dark fluid that Sarah recognized as Nexary blood leaked from multiple wounds. But it was his physical appearance that truly caught her attention. Unlike the perfectly symmetrical features she'd seen in official Nexary broadcasts, his face bore striking variations. One side of his cranial ridge was more pronounced than the other, and his scales showed unusual color patterns that rippled and shifted even in unconsciousness. "He's alive," she announced, medical scanner hovering over his chest. "But barely. These readings, they're like nothing in our database." Dr. Martinez appeared at her shoulder. "Sarah, we need to contact Nexary authorities. You know their laws about medical intervention by other species." "Look at him, James," Sarah gestured to the wounded alien. "These injuries weren't an accident. Someone tried to kill him. What if the authorities are the ones who did this?" Before Martinez could respond, the Nexary's eyes snapped open. They were silver, another deviation from the typical Nexary gold. More striking was the immediate sense of presence that filled Sarah's mind, not thoughts exactly, but emotions, fear, pain, desperation. "Please," he gasped in perfect standard English, "don't send me back. They'll kill me." Sarah felt the weight of the moment, knowing her next decision could impact not just this individual's life but potentially human-Nexary relations. The diplomatic protocols were clear. The safe choice would be to report this immediately. "Get me a stasis pod," she told Martinez instead. "And delete the last 30 minutes of external sensor logs." The Nexary's eyes widened slightly, and Sarah felt a wave of gratitude wash over her that she somehow knew wasn't her own. That's when she realized, the stories about Nexary empaths weren't just rumors. She was looking at one. And if the stories were true, she now understood why someone had tried to kill him. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen," she said, helping him onto the medical transport. "You're safe now. Can you tell me your name?" "Kale," he managed, his silver eyes fixed on her face. "Prince Kale of the 4th House of Nexar." His expression turned bitter. "Though I doubt I still hold that title." As they rushed him to the quarantine bay, Sarah's mind raced. A Nexary prince, an empath, apparently cast out by his own people, this went far beyond a simple rescue. But looking at his injuries, at the obvious signs of systematic persecution written in his unusual features, she knew she couldn't have made any other choice. What she couldn't know, was that this moment would later be marked in history as the catalyst that changed two civilizations forever. In the quarantine bay, Sarah worked quickly to stabilize her patient. Nexary physiology was notoriously complex, their double-helix cellular structure making them resistant to most conventional treatments. But Sarah hadn't spent her career studying xenobiology to be stopped by complicated genetics. "Your body is fighting the synthetic plasma," she explained, adjusting the mixture. "I need to know if you have any genetic variations from standard Nexary physiology." Kale's laugh was pained. "You could say that. I am what my people call Vieran, changed. A genetic aberration that occurs in less than 1% of births." His silver eyes met hers. "It gives us abilities they fear." "The empathic capabilities," Sarah said. "They're real, then?" "Very." His expression darkened. "And forbidden. To be Vieran is to be sentenced to death, or worse, complete genetic restructuring. I chose exile instead, but—" He gestured to his wounds. "My family had other ideas." Sarah felt another wave of emotion, loneliness, resignation, and underneath it all, a fierce determination. The feelings weren't overwhelming, but they were distinctly separate from her own emotional state. "You're projecting," she said softly. "I can feel it." Kale immediately drew back, both physically and mentally. The emotional presence vanished. "I apologize. It happens when I'm weakened. I should have better control." "No," Sarah said quickly, surprising herself with her vehemence. "Don't apologize. This is fascinating. In all our diplomatic exchanges, there's never been any mention of empathic abilities among your people. The implications for communication, for understanding between our species." She trailed off as she noticed Kale's expression. "But that's exactly why they want to keep it secret, isn't it?" "My people believe in perfect order," Kale said, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Perfect symmetry, perfect control. The Vieran threaten that order. We see too much, feel too much. We cannot be controlled." His hand clenched into a fist. "But what they fear most is that we can sense the truth about our leaders." "What truth?" But before Kale could answer, the station's AI interrupted. Multiple Nexary vessels detected entering the system. "They are broadcasting an official query regarding a missing diplomatic vessel." Sarah watched the color drain from Kale's scales. "They found me faster than I expected," he whispered. Sarah squared her shoulders, already formulating a plan. "Computer, initiate privacy protocol Chen Alpha. Full containment, no external communications without my direct authorization." She turned to Kale. "Whatever truth you're carrying, whatever made them try to kill you, I'm not letting them finish the job." The surprise and gratitude in his silver eyes was purely physical this time. He was carefully maintaining his emotional walls. "Why would you risk this for me? Your station, your career." "Because 15 years ago, I took an oath to preserve life and advance understanding between species," Sarah said firmly. "And I think you might be the key to both." As the station's alerts announced the approaching Nexary vessels, Sarah knew she was committed. She just placed herself, and potentially the entire station, in the crosshairs of one of the most powerful civilizations in known space. But looking at Kale, at the evidence of systematic persecution written in his very genes, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. What she didn't realize yet was that this decision would uncover a conspiracy that went far deeper than genetic persecution, one that would challenge everything both humans and Nexary thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. The Nexary warships hung in space like polished obsidian daggers, their presence turning Research Station Omega-7's observation windows into frames for an increasingly hostile view. Sarah watched them from the quarantine bay, her fingers drumming against the medical console as she considered their options. 3 capital ships, Kale observed from his recovery bed, his voice stronger after 12 hours of treatment. "House Varek's fleet. My sister spares no expense in her pursuit." Sarah turned from the window. Your sister sent those ships to kill you. Aura was always the perfect daughter. Bitterness crept into his voice. Perfect symmetry, perfect loyalty, perfect adherence to the natural order. When my abilities manifested, she saw it as her duty to cleanse the family line. The medical monitors beeped steadily as Sarah checked his vital signs. His unusual cellular structure was already adapting to her treatments, showing remarkable regenerative capabilities. These abilities of yours, she said carefully, you mentioned they helped you sense something about your leaders. What exactly did you discover? Kale's silver eyes darted to the door before he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Have you heard of the cordyceps fungus on Earth? How it parasitizes insects, controlling their behavior. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying? The Nexary High Council, the ruling houses, they're all infected by something similar. A parasitic consciousness that bonds to neural tissue. Kale's scales rippled with agitation. We Vieran can sense their presence. That's why they hunt us so ruthlessly. We're the only ones who know they're not themselves. Before Sarah could respond, the station's AI interrupted, priority transmission from Nexary command vessel. They are demanding immediate inspection of the station. Dr. Martinez's voice came through the intercom. Sarah, we need to talk. Now. She found Martinez in the main conference room, along with the station's security chief, Colonel Rivera. Neither looked happy. This has to stop, Martinez said as soon as the door closed. Whatever you're protecting, it's not worth starting an interstellar incident over. They'll kill him, Sarah countered. He's a political refugee seeking asylum. He's a member of their royal family, Rivera pointed out. We have no jurisdiction here. He has proof their leadership is compromised, Sarah said, deciding to risk the truth. Parasitic organisms controlling their neural functions. That's why they're so desperate to find him. Martinez and Rivera exchanged looks. That's a hell of a claim, Rivera said slowly. Any evidence? Beyond his empathic abilities? Not yet. But dash. The station shuddered as something clamped onto their outer hull. Emergency lights flashed. They're forcing an override of our docking protocols, the AI announced. Nexary boarding party approaching airlock 3. Sarah's mind raced. How long? 5 minutes until they breach our containment. Colonel, Sarah turned to Rivera, what if I could prove it? Would you help us then? Rivera's military training warred with his curiosity. How? The parasites have to leave trace evidence in their host's blood chemistry. If I can get a sample from one of the boarding party. She left the implications hanging. Rivera checked his sidearm. I'll give you 10 minutes. After that, we do this by the book. Sarah ran back to quarantine. Kale was already standing, though shakily. They're here, he said unnecessarily. I need you to trust me, Sarah said, prepping a medical scanner. And I need you to tell me exactly what these parasites do to Nexary physiology. As Kale described the subtle changes he could sense, altered hormone levels, unique protein markers, Sarah programmed the scanner. They worked quickly, racing against the sound of boots in the corridor outside. The door slid open. 3 Nexary warriors entered, their ceremonial armor gleaming under the medical bay's lights. Their leader, a female with perfect, golden-scaled symmetry, stepped forward. Sister, Kale said quietly. Aura's perfect features showed no emotion. The aberration will be remanded to House Varek custody immediately. Sarah stepped forward, scanner hidden behind her back. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, Chief Xenobiologist. According to station protocol, I need to clear any prisoner transfers with a medical scan. That won't be necessary, Aura said, but Sarah was already moving, the scanner humming to life. The readings flashed across her tablet. Kale had been right, Aura's neural patterns showed clear signs of parasitic interference. More importantly, the scanner detected something else, a localized electromagnetic field emanating from the base of her skull. "Colonel," Sarah called out, transmitting the data to Rivera's tablet. "Are you seeing this?" Rivera's voice crackled over the intercom. "Clear as day, Doctor. Security teams to quarantine, full containment protocols." Aura's hand moved to her weapon, but she was too late. The station's emergency containment fields sprang up, trapping her and her guards in separate energy bubbles. "What have you done?" Aura snarled, her perfect composure cracking. "Expose the truth," Kale said, stepping forward. "Show them, sister. Show them what controls you." As if in response to his words, something shifted beneath the scales at the base of Aura's neck. A dark, segmented appendage emerged, probing the energy field. Sarah heard Martinez swear over the intercom. The security teams entering the room stopped short at the sight. "By all the stars," Rivera breathed. "It's true. The Nexari people need to see this," Sarah said, already recording. "The whole galaxy needs to see this." But even as she spoke, alarms blared. The parasitic organism was somehow interfering with the containment field. "Energy fluctuations detected," the AI warned. "Containment failing in 3, 2. The field collapsed. Aura's weapon cleared its holster. And in that moment, Sarah Chen discovered that humans weren't the only ones capable of self-sacrifice. Kale threw himself forward, his newly healed body intercepting his sister's shot. But instead of falling, he caught her in what looked like an embrace. Sarah felt it then, a wave of pure emotional energy that staggered everyone in the room. Kale wasn't just projecting, he was forcing his empathic abilities to their limit, creating a feedback loop between himself and the parasite controlling his sister. Aura screamed. The dark appendage writhed and then retracted completely, leaving her to collapse in her brother's arms. "Neural parasite neutralized," the AI announced clinically. "Subject showing signs of autonomous neural activity." Sarah rushed forward with a sedative, but Aura was already unconscious. The other two guards had dropped as well, their own parasites retreating from whatever emotional assault Kale had unleashed. "The parasites," Kale gasped, clearly drained. "They can't handle strong emotional feedback. That's why they fear empaths. Why they made our people suppress emotions in the first place." Sarah supported him as he swayed. "You could have been killed." "Worth it," he managed a weak smile. "Besides, I had faith in human ingenuity. Your scanner proved what I've known for years." "This is going to change everything," Sarah said, looking at the unconscious Nexari and the retreating parasites. "The political implications alone." "Yes," Kale agreed. "But first, we need to warn the other ships. Their crews are also infected, and now that we've exposed them." Right on cue, the station shuddered as the Nexari vessels opened fire. Sarah helped Kale to the console. "So much for diplomatic solutions. Any other weaknesses these parasites have that we should know about?" "A few," Kale said, his silver eyes gleaming with renewed purpose. "And with human technology to amplify them." As they worked to save both their lives and the future of two civilizations, Sarah couldn't help but appreciate the irony. The Nexari had feared emotional contamination from their empaths, only to fall victim to a far worse contamination of their own making. Sometimes, it took an outsider's perspective, and a healthy dose of human determination, to expose the truth. The research station's shields groaned under another barrage from the Nexari warships. Sarah's fingers flew across the emergency controls, rerouting power from non-essential systems as warning lights flashed across every console. "Their attack pattern is changing," Kale observed, studying the tactical display. His sister Aura lay sedated in the medical bay, along with her two guards, all three finally free of their parasitic controllers. "They're not trying to destroy the station anymore. They're attempting to disable our communications array. They don't want us broadcasting the evidence," Sarah realized. She had already transmitted their initial findings about the parasites to Earth's Scientific Council, but the detailed data was still being compiled. How much time do you think we have? Minutes, at most. The parasites operate with a hive mind. By now, every infected Nexary in the fleet knows we can expose them. Kale's scales shifted color with concern. And they'll have called for reinforcements. Colonel Rivera's voice crackled over the intercom, "Dr. Chen, we've got bigger problems. Our long-range sensors just picked up 6 more Nexary vessels entering the system. Heavy carriers, by the look of them." Sarah felt her heart sink. The station's defenses were barely holding against 3 ships. 9 would overwhelm them in seconds. But Kale's expression had turned thoughtful. "Doctor, you said your scanner detected an electromagnetic field around the parasites?" "Yes, it seems to be how they maintain their neural connection to the host." Sarah pulled up the data. "Why?" "Because Nexary ships use electromagnetic shielding to protect against solar radiation. If we could modify that scanner's frequency." His silver eyes met hers. "We might be able to disrupt every parasite in range simultaneously." It was a desperate plan, but Sarah felt a surge of hope. This was what humans did best, improvising solutions with whatever they had at hand. "We'd need to boost the signal strength by several orders of magnitude." The station's main communications array, Dr. Martinez suggested, joining them at the console. "If we repurpose it as an amplifier, we'd have to lower our shields to do it," Rivera pointed out. "Then we better work fast." Sarah was already modifying the scanner's output frequency. "Kale, I need you to tell me exactly what that emotional feedback felt like when you overloaded the parasites in your sister." As Kale described the specific emotional resonance that had driven out the parasites, Sarah translated it into wavelength patterns. It was delicate work, made harder by the constant shuddering of the station under enemy fire. "Shields at 40%, the AI announced. Hull breach on Deck 7. Emergency containment holding. The new ships are taking up attack positions," Rivera reported. "Whatever you're going to do it fast." Sarah's hands were steady as she made the final adjustments. "Kale, I need you to project those same emotions again. The scanner will amplify them along with the electromagnetic pulse." "It could kill him," Martinez protested. "The neural strain." "I'll do it," Kale said firmly. "My people have lived under these parasites' control for too long. Better to die trying to free them." Sarah caught his hand. "No one's dying today." She managed a smile. "Trust human ingenuity, remember." She'd modified the scanner to draw power directly from the station's core, routing it through the communications array. In theory, it would create a cascading pulse of both electromagnetic disruption and amplified emotional feedback, affecting every parasite within range of the station. In theory. "Ready?" she asked Kale, who had positioned himself near the modified scanner. He nodded, his silver eyes closing in concentration. "Remember, if this works, there will be thousands of suddenly uncontrolled Nexary out there. Some may still be hostile. We'll deal with that problem when we reach it," Sarah said. "Colonel, prepare to drop shields on my mark." The deck shuddered again as another blast struck the station. Warning lights flashed red across every surface. "Shields at 20%, the AI reported. Critical failure imminent." "Now or never," Rivera said grimly. Sarah took a deep breath. "Drop shields. Initiating pulse in 3, 2, 1. The lights dimmed as power redirected to the communications array. Kale's face contorted in concentration, and Sarah felt the familiar brush of his emotional projection, but amplified 1,000-fold by her modifications. The pulse shot outward in a visible wave of electromagnetic energy. On the tactical display, Sarah watched it expand to encompass all 9 Nexary ships. For a moment, nothing happened. Then every ship stopped firing. The tactical channels erupted with confused voices, some angry, some frightened, all of them suddenly free of parasitic control. Through the observation window, Sarah could see dark shapes being ejected from the Nexary ships into space, the parasites, fleeing their hosts. It worked, she breathed, hardly daring to believe it. Kale, it. She turned to find him slumped over the console, blood trickling from his nose. His scales had turned a dangerous shade of gray. Medical emergency, she snapped, rushing to his side. I need a trauma team in the command center now. As she worked to stabilize him, the tactical channels continued to buzz with activity. The Nexary crews were regaining control of their ships, trying to make sense of what had happened. Some were already requesting to dock with the station. Dr. Chen, the AI interrupted, I'm detecting unusual movement from the ejected parasitic organisms. They appear to be congregating. Sarah looked up from her patient just in time to see it through the observation window. The parasites were joining together, merging into a single, massive form that pulsed with an inner light. And it was growing. Tell me someone else is seeing this, Martinez said quietly. The merged parasitic mass was now larger than any of the Nexary ships. Its surface rippled with patterns that hurt to look at, and something about its shape seemed to defy normal geometry. It's revealing its true form, Kale whispered, regaining consciousness. The hive mind, it's more than we imagined. The thing in space turned what might have been an attention sensor toward the station. And in that moment, Sarah realized that freeing the Nexary had been the easy part. The real fight, the one that would determine the fate of both their species, was just beginning. Get me a channel to Earth Command, she ordered. And find out if any of our newly freed Nexary friends out there know what the hell we're really dealing with. Whatever this entity was, whatever its true purpose, Sarah knew one thing: humanity in the Nexary would face it together. After all, nothing united species quite like a common enemy. Especially one that had been pulling their strings all along. Sarah stood before the assembled Nexary captains in Research Station Omega-7's main conference room, trying not to stare at the massive entity that hung motionless in space beyond the observation windows. 15 hours had passed since the parasites had merged, and in that time, the creature had done nothing but maintain its impossible position, defying both physics and understanding. What we're looking at, she explained, gesturing to the holographic display of her scanner data, is a collective consciousness that's existed far longer than either of our civilizations. Kale, still pale but standing, translated her words into the formal Nexary dialect. Though most of the officers understood standard English, protocol demanded official translations during military proceedings. His sister Aura stood at his side, her perfect features haunted by the memory of her possession. The parasites weren't just controlling us, Aura added, her golden scales dulled with exhaustion. They were preparing us. Changing our society over generations. Preparing you for what? Colonel Rivera asked. The answer came from First Captain Venn, his ceremonial armor still bearing the scars of his violent liberation from parasitic control. Harvest. The word fell like a stone in the quiet room. They were cultivating us, making us perfect hosts. The suppression of emotion, the drive for symmetry and order, it wasn't cultural evolution. It was domestication. Sarah brought up new data on the holographic display. The parasites modified Nexary biology over centuries, gradually altering your neural architecture. But they didn't account for the emergence of empaths like Kale. The Vieran were an unexpected mutation, one that could detect and resist their influence. And now that we've exposed them, Kale said, they've revealed their true form. The question is, what are they waiting for? As if in response to his words, the entity pulsed with inner light. The station's sensors screamed with new data. Energy spike. Martinez called from his monitoring station. It's broadcasting something. The sound that filled their minds wasn't audio, it was pure concept, ancient and vast. Sarah felt her knees buckle as understanding flooded her consciousness. Beside her, the Nexary officers reacted similarly, their scales shifting in patterns of distress. Stars above, Kale whispered. They're not just parasites. They're scouts. Through the psychic broadcast, Sarah saw it all. The entity was part of something far larger, a cosmic consciousness that moved between galaxies, seeding worlds with its offspring. These scouts would find promising species, guide their development over millennia, and when the hosts were properly prepared. The main body arrives, Sarah finished the thought. How long? 37 hours, Aura said, interpreting the broadcast. That's how long until their parent reaches our system. Then we have 37 hours to find a way to stop it. Sarah turned to the assembled officers. The parasites underestimated humanity because we weren't part of their plan. They focused on the Nexary, never considering that an alliance between our species might be their undoing. What can we possibly do against something that ancient? Martinez asked. That powerful? We can do what humans have always done, Sarah said firmly. Adapt. Improvise. And most importantly, surprise them. She looked at Kale. You said the parasites couldn't handle strong emotional feedback. What if we could weaponize that on a stellar scale? Kale's silver eyes widened as he followed her thinking. The empathic resonance that drove them out, combined with human technology. He turned to his sister. Aura, the Nexary fleet's electromagnetic shields. Could be modified like you did with the station's array, Aura finished, her military training engaging with the tactical possibility. But amplified across multiple ships. Creating a cascading web of emotional and electromagnetic disruption, Sarah nodded. Large enough to affect even something that size. Captain Venn stepped forward. The Nexary fleet will need time to coordinate such a maneuver. And we'll need to get close, very close. Leave that to us, Rivera said. Human ships are smaller, more maneuverable. We can run interference, keep that thing occupied while you get into position. Sarah felt a surge of hope as humans and Nexary began working together, sharing tactical knowledge and technical expertise. The entity had spent centuries keeping their species separate, never imagining they might join forces. That would be its first mistake. But if Sarah had anything to say about it, not its last. There's something else, Kale said quietly as the others planned. Something in that broadcast, a fear. Ancient as it is, powerful as it is, it fears what we might become. Not just humans or Nexary, but what we might achieve together. Sarah watched the cooperation unfolding around them, human ingenuity combining with Nexary precision, two species finding strength in their differences rather than perfection in uniformity. Maybe that's exactly what we should become, she said. The entity pulsed again, perhaps sensing their defiance. But this time, no one flinched from its broadcast. They had work to do, and only 37 hours to rewrite a destiny that had been planned for millennia. Sarah looked at her unlikely allies, human and Nexary, scientist and warrior, all united against a common threat, and smiled. The parasites had tried to create perfect order. Instead, they had created the perfect resistance. The combined human-Nexary fleet moved into formation as the first ripples of distortion appeared at the edge of the solar system. Sarah watched from Research Station Omega-7's command center, her modified scanner interfaces showing energy readings that defied conventional physics. The parent entity is arriving, Kale announced, his silver eyes fixed on the spatial anomaly growing before them. All those centuries of preparation, leading to this moment. 27 ships hung in the void, 15 Nexary cruisers arranged in a precise geometric pattern, supported by 12 human vessels darting between them like silver needles threading an invisible web. Each had been modified with Sarah's resonance technology, ready to create the largest electromagnetic emotional feedback wave ever attempted. All ships report ready, Aura announced from her tactical station. Her golden scales gleamed under the emergency lighting as she coordinated the Nexary fleet. Emotional resonance chambers charged to maximum. Human vessels in position, Rivera confirmed. Ready to begin interference runs on your mark. The space-time distortion reached its crescendo. Something emerged, something that made the merged scout entity look tiny by comparison. It unfurled like a flower made of impossible geometries, each petal larger than a planet, its surface writhing with patterns that hurt to comprehend. Mother of Stars, Martinez whispered. The entity's consciousness brushed against their minds, ancient and vast beyond measure. Sarah felt its surprise at finding its scouts exposed, its carefully prepared hosts armed against it. Then came its anger, and its hunger. Now! Sarah commanded. The human ships burst into action, their engines flaring as they executed maneuvers that would have torn Nexary vessels apart. They danced through the entity's reaching tendrils, drawing its attention, making themselves targets while the larger Nexary cruisers moved into their final attack positions. Primary resonance wave charging, Kale reported. 70%, 80. The entity struck. 3 human ships vanished in bursts of light as reality itself warped around them. But they had succeeded in their task, the massive consciousness was fully focused on swatting these annoying gnats, ignoring the larger threat until it was too late. Maximum charge achieved. Aura shouted. All ships, release. The Nexary fleet lit up like newborn stars. The electromagnetic pulse merged with Kale's amplified emotional resonance, multiplied across 27 vessels. It struck the cosmic entity like a tsunami hitting a mountain, unstoppable force meeting immovable object. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entity screamed. The sound existed in no physical spectrum, but every being in range felt it in their soul. The creature's perfect geometry began to fracture, its impossible angles collapsing in on themselves as the combined power of human technology and Nexary empathy tore through its ancient defenses. It's working. Sarah exulted. All ships, maintain the resonance field. But the entity wasn't finished. As its outer form crumbled, it released a final, desperate attack, a psychic blast that threatened to overwhelm every mind in range. Sarah felt Kale grab her hand as the wave hit. Through their contact, she understood what he planned to do. No, she gasped. The feedback loop could kill you. Trust me, he said simply, and opened his mind fully. Through their connection, Sarah felt everything, his determination, his hope, and something deeper. Something that had grown between them through all they'd faced together. He took her human emotions, so free and unrestrained, and combined them with his empathic abilities to create something entirely new. The station's modified arrays picked up their shared resonance and amplified it. The human fleet, so precisely positioned, reflected and magnified it further. The Nexary ships, their crews finally free to feel, added their own emotional strength to the wave. The entity's attack shattered against this wall of pure feeling, not just emotion, but connection. Understanding. Unity. Everything it had tried to prevent. Its massive form began to break apart, fracturing into countless pieces that dissolved into spacetime itself. The scout entity followed, its carefully maintained form collapsing as the power that sustained it vanished. In the aftermath, Sarah held Kale as he recovered, both of them watching the sensor readings confirm what they already knew: the ancient threat was gone. Not just driven away, but completely destroyed by something it had never anticipated, the combined strength of 2 species it had tried to keep apart. You know what this means, Kale said softly as the human and Nexary crews began rescue operations. Everything changes now. Both our civilizations. Sarah smiled. Good. They needed to change. She looked at the ships working together, at Aura coordinating with Rivera, at humans and Nexary moving past centuries of separation to help each other. Look at what we can accomplish together. The Council will resist, he warned. Even without the parasite's influence, there are those who prefer the old ways. Then we'll show them a better way. Sarah squeezed his hand. After all, that's what humans do best, imagine possibilities that nobody else can see. And now we have allies who can help us make those possibilities real. As if to prove her point, a Nexary cruiser executed a perfect rescue of a damaged human vessel, while human ships darted around helping to stabilize damaged Nexary systems. Two species, working together not despite their differences, but because of them. You know, Kale said thoughtfully, the parasites were right about one thing, they should have feared what we might become together. Oh. Sarah raised an eyebrow. And what's that? He smiled, his silver eyes reflecting the light of possibility. Something entirely new. The research station systems were already recording messages from both Earth and Nexar, demanding explanations, updates, assurances. The political ramifications would be enormous. The scientific implications, revolutionary. The cultural changes, unprecedented. But looking at the combined fleet, at the crews who had faced cosmic horror together and emerged stronger, Sarah knew they would face it all the same way they had faced the entity, together, drawing strength from their differences, finding unity in diversity rather than conformity. It wasn't the future anyone had imagined. It was better. And it was just beginning.